first time my son-in-law screamed, a raw, ragged sound of pure animal terror. It was because he had caught my reflection in a darkened window, standing right behind him. He thought it was a trick of the light. He would soon learn. It was not. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Isabelle. My name is Isabelle Laurent. I am 83 years old, and I am from the most beautiful and haunted city in America, Savannah, Georgia. This is a story about a haunting. But the ghost was me. It is a secret I have held in the walls of this old house for over a year. A story that even my own daughter, my sweet, gentle Catherine, does not fully understand. She knows her husband had a complete nervous breakdown. She knows he was tormented by what he called a shadow in the house, a presence that drove him to the edge of his sanity. She does not know that the shadow had a name, and that name was mine. Gosh, it is a terrible thing to confess, to have waged a war of quiet, psychological terror against your own family. The shame of it, it can be a crushing weight. When you are told, day after day, in 1,000 small, cruel ways, that you are invisible, you start to believe it. You start to fade. You become a ghost in your own life, long before you decide to play the part for someone else. My son-in-law's mistake was not that he thought I was invisible. His mistake was that he said it out loud. I am telling this story now because I am done with fading. I am done with being a ghost. And I am here to tell you that there is a great power in being underestimated. And perhaps my story can be a small flame for anyone else out there who is being made to feel like a shadow in their own home. Before I begin this strange tale, I would be so very grateful for your kindness. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support, you see, is a validation. It is a quiet reminder to an old woman that she is in fact still here, that she is seen. And it gives me the courage to confess the story of how I made my son-in-law see me too. Thank you, my dears. My life, the one that truly matters, has always been intertwined with this house. My late husband, my dear Jean-Luc, was an architect who specialized in historic restoration. He didn't just build things, he resurrected them. We bought this house, the Laurent house, on our honeymoon in 1968. It was a beautiful, fading belle, neglected and forgotten. And for the next 50 years, it was our shared passion, our art project, our sanctuary. Jean-Luc was a student of history, a master of detail. He didn't just renovate, he curated. He believed that every old house had a soul and a secret life. As he brought this house back to life, he showed me all of its secrets. You see, my love, he'd whispered, his eyes sparkling with delight. This was built in 1850. The original owner was a Union sympathizer. This isn't just a wall, it's a secret. A hidden servant's passage, running the length of the house, with tiny peepholes disguised as decorative carvings, so one could observe the rooms without being seen. Every room has its own little story, its own little ghost. He taught me the house's language. He taught me which floorboards creaked, which doors sighed, which rooms carried a whisper from one floor to the next. He taught me its sight lines, its shadows, its hidden ways. We were a team, he and I and the house, a trinity of love and history. We had one child, our daughter, Catherine. She is the gentlest of souls, an artist, a watercolorist. She inherited my love for the beauty of this house, but none of her father's passion for its bones, its secrets. She sees the world in soft washes of color, not in hard lines and hidden passages. She has always been a person who trusts too easily, who believes that a charming surface is a reflection of a charming soul. And then, 5 years ago, Catherine brought Gregory home. He was a property developer from Atlanta. He was handsome, charismatic, and had a smile that could disarm an entire army. He treated my Catherine like a delicate, precious jewel, and she, in turn, was utterly mesmerized by his strength, his confidence, his modern, decisive energy. The first time he walked through this house, I felt a chill, even on a warm Savannah afternoon. He was not looking at our home with the eye of a guest. He was looking at it with the eye of a predator. "Incredible," he'd said, standing in the grand foyer and looking up at the sweeping staircase. "Absolutely incredible. What's the square footage on this place? The land value alone must be astronomical. The zoning here is for single-family residences, I assume. It's a crime. You could easily get a variance, tear this old thing down, and put up a dozen multi-million-dollar luxury condos." He saw our life's work, our sanctuary, and his first thought was to tear it down. Catherine had just laughed, a little nervously. "Oh, Gregory, don't be silly. This is my family home. It's a historical landmark." He had smiled, that brilliant, sharp smile, and patted her arm. "Of course, darling. I'm just saying, it's an underperforming asset. An underperforming asset. That's what he saw. He didn't see the hand-carved molding, where Jean-Luc and I had spent a month stripping away 100 years of paint. He didn't see the window seat where I had read stories to my daughter. He saw a teardown. He saw a number on a balance sheet. I tried to dislike him, but he was so clever. He was a master of charm. He never insulted my home again. Instead, he praised it, but always in his own language. He admired its structure, its location, its potential. And he was so very attentive to me. He would listen to my stories for hours, his eyes full of what I mistook for sincere interest. He was not listening to my memories. He was gathering intelligence. He was mapping the battlefield. After my Jean-Luc passed away 2 years ago, their visits became more frequent. And then came the proposition, wrapped in the silken ribbon of concern. "Isabelle, my love," Gregory said to me one evening, his voice a low, soothing murmur. He and Catherine were both there, a united front. "We've been so worried about you, all alone, in this enormous house. The upkeep, the stairs, it's too much for you." "And we have news," Catherine chimed in, her eyes shining. "We're going to have a baby." My heart, so heavy with grief, soared. "A grandchild." "So we have the perfect solution," Gregory continued smoothly. "We're going to move in. We'll move in here with you. We can help you manage the house, take care of everything. And you can be here with your grandchild. We can be a family, all together. Safe." Sanity. It was everything I thought I wanted. The end of my loneliness. The sound of life and laughter in these quiet, empty rooms again. I said yes. I ignored the faint, cold whisper of my intuition. I ignored the memory of his eyes as he calculated the value of my home's destruction. I didn't realize they weren't moving in to take care of me. They were moving in to take over. I wasn't an aging mother to be cherished. I was an obstacle to be managed. A temporary occupant in the house he already considered his own. And his first move was to make me invisible. The occupation was a slow, quiet, and masterful campaign. Gregory was a brilliant strategist. He understood that a direct assault would have been met with resistance, not just from me, but from Catherine. So he chose a different tactic. He chose the tactic of erasure. It began with a whisper, a suggestion, always framed as a loving concern for my comfort and safety. "Isabelle, my love," he'd say, looking at the beautiful heavy velvet curtains in the drawing room. "These are magnificent, but they block so much of the natural light. And they're such dust collectors. It can't be good for your breathing. Let's get something lighter, more modern, shall we?" Gaha. And down came the curtains my husband and I had chosen together, replaced by stark, white, remote-controlled blinds. The room was brighter, yes, but it was also colder, stripped of its softness. He did it room by room. My husband's favorite reading chair, the one with the worn leather and the perfect indentation from 50 years of use, was replaced with a sharp, angular Italian thing that looked like a piece of modern sculpture. "The old one was so bad for your posture, Isabelle," he'd explained. My collection of antique maps, my husband's passion, was taken down from the walls of the study. "So cluttered," he'd murmured. "A clean workspace promotes clear thinking." They were replaced by large, aggressive, abstract paintings from a gallery owned by one of his friends. Each change was a small act of violence, a quiet desecration of my memories. And my daughter, my dear Catherine, was his willing accomplice. "Oh, Mother, it does look so much cleaner now," she would say, her eyes trying to convince both me and herself. "Gregory just has such a wonderful eye for design." He never raised his voice at me. He was never overtly unkind. His cruelty was far more sophisticated. It was the cruelty of utter disregard. He would have conversations around me, as if I weren't there. He would be in the kitchen with Catherine, and I would walk in, and he would simply continue his sentence, his eyes looking straight through me. He would ask Catherine what she, referring to me, wanted for dinner, while I was sitting at the same table. I was being systematically demoted from the matriarch of the house to a piece of sentient, inconvenient furniture, a ghost at the feast of my own life. My inner world became a torment. Was I being overly sensitive? Was this just the way of the modern world, a world to which I no longer belong? I would lie awake at night in my beautiful, unfamiliar bedroom and question my own sanity. He was so charming, so kind on the surface, that I began to wonder if the coldness, the dismissal, was all in my own mind. The breaking point, the moment the quiet, simmering war became an open declaration, came the day they hosted their first large party. It was an engagement party for one of Gregory's business partners. My home was filled with loud, sharp, confident people I didn't know. They moved through my rooms, drinks in hand, their voices echoing off the newly bare walls. I felt like a stranger, a docent in my own museum. I was sitting in a corner of the drawing room, trying to make myself as small as possible, when I overheard a conversation. Gregory was holding court with a small group of his developer friends. They were admiring the view of the garden from the French doors. "It's a magnificent property, Greg," one of the men said. "A true gold mine." "It is," Gregory agreed, a smug, proprietary smile on his face. "But it's a long-term project. There are complications." He gestured vaguely, with his head towards the corner where I was sitting. "The original occupant is still in residence. A bit of a sentimental fixture we have to manage for now. For all intents and purposes, she's invisible. But legally, she's still on the paperwork. It's a delicate situation. A sentimental fixture. Invisible." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. He had finally said it. He had finally given a voice to his campaign of erasure. I was not a person. I was a complication. A fixture. An invisible legal problem to be managed until I was, presumably, no longer a problem at all. I stood up. My hands were trembling with a rage so profound it made me feel dizzy. I walked over to the group. The men fell silent, looking at me with surprise. "Gregory," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "may I have a word with you?" He looked annoyed, his perfect host's smile faltering for a second. "Of course, Isabelle," he said, and he followed me out onto the veranda. The night air was cool on my burning cheeks. I looked at him, this handsome, confident stranger who was living in my house, who was married to my daughter. "I would like you to explain what you meant," I said, my voice quiet, but shaking with fury, "when you referred to me as an invisible, sentimental fixture." He had the grace to look, for a second, ashamed. But it passed quickly, replaced by a patronizing impatience. "Oh, Isabelle," he sighed, shaking his head as if I were a child who had overheard something I wasn't meant to. "You mustn't take things so literally. It was just business talk. A figure of speech." "I am not a figure of speech, Gregory," I said, my voice like ice. "I am the owner of this house, and you are a guest here." And then the mask came off completely. The charm evaporated, and I saw the cold, ruthless predator underneath. "Are you?" he said with a soft, ugly laugh. "Are you really the owner? Or are you just the old woman who lives here? An old woman who is, let's be honest, becoming more and more forgetful every day. An old woman whose daughter thinks her husband knows what's best. Who do you think Catherine will believe? Me? Or you?" So yes, For all intents and purposes, you are invisible. The sooner you accept that, the more pleasant this delicate situation will be for everyone. Inarton. He turned and walked back into the party, leaving me alone on the veranda, my heart shattered into a million pieces. He was right. Catherine would believe him. Everyone would believe him. He had spent years building his case, painting me as a dotty, sentimental old woman. He had made me invisible. I stood there for a long time, the sounds of his party washing over me. And in that profound, crushing moment of utter humiliation, a strange and terrible thought began to form in my mind. It came from a memory of my husband, of a story he had told me about this house, about its secret life. He wanted me to be invisible. Fine. Die. I would be invisible. But I would not be a fixture. I would be a shadow. I would be a whisper in a locked room. I would be a footstep on an empty stair. I would be the ghost in the machine he so desperately wanted to control. He wanted a haunted house? I would give him one. That night, after the last of Gregory's loud, braying friends had finally departed, I did not go to sleep. The woman who had gone out onto that veranda, the hurt, humiliated, invisible old woman, did not come back in. A different woman returned. A woman made of ice and memory, and a cold, clear, righteous fury. Gregory's mistake was that he believed his own narrative. He truly thought I was a weak, forgetful, sentimental fool. He had no idea that my mind, the mind he was so certain was failing, was now working with a clarity it hadn't possessed in years. The fog of grief had been burned away by the fire of his contempt. He wanted me to be invisible. He had no idea I knew how. My fight back did not begin with a confrontation. It began with a whisper, with a memory of my Jean-Luc. I went to the wall in my bedroom, the one that connected to the grand, sweeping main staircase. I ran my hands over the ornate, silk wallpaper until I found it. A tiny, almost invisible seam. I pressed, just as Jean-Luc had shown me, on a carved wooden rosebud. With a faint click, a section of the wall swung inward, opening into the darkness. The air in the passageway was cold and smelled of dust and 100 years of secrets. It was my husband's hidden world, and now it would be mine. It ran the entire length of the house, a secret artery connecting every major room, with a dozen hidden entrances and exits disguised as closets or wall panels. I had a map of this house that Gregory, with all his developers' blueprints, could never dream of. My campaign began the very next morning. It was a war of nerves, a slow, methodical erosion of his sanity. I started simply. I would wait until he was alone in the study, his home office, and I would walk the hidden passage that ran behind its walls. I would make a single, deliberate sound. A floorboard creak. A soft knock. Just one. At first he would dismiss it. The sounds of an old house settling. But I was patient. I was a student of his habits. I knew when he would be alone. I knew when the house was quiet. I would let him sit in silence for an hour, and then a single soft footstep on the servants' stairs that ran alongside his office. A sound that had no right to be there. He started to grow restless. I would watch him through the tiny peepholes disguised as knots in the wooden paneling. I saw him get up and check the hallway. He'd find it empty. I saw the flicker of confusion, of annoyance, in his eyes. My next move was to use his own modern technology against him. He had installed a state-of-the-art sound system, with speakers in every room, all controlled by his phone. One evening, he was on the veranda, having a drink and talking loudly to a colleague, boasting about his plans for the condo development. I slipped into the study. It took me a moment, but I figured out how to connect my old, simple MP3 player to his complex system. I waited, and when he was in the middle of a sentence, I played a sound. Just one. The sound of a single, clear piano note. The one from the Chopin nocturne Jean-Luc used to play. I let it echo through the house for just 3 seconds and then stopped. He said it as a joke, but the seed of the idea was planted. By him. The house was haunted. I became more daring. I learned to move through the passages like a whisper. I would wait until he was in the drawing room in the evening, reading a report. I would slip out of a hidden panel in the main hall, cross the foyer in my soft slippers, and move one of his possessions. Not something of mine, something of his. His favorite leather briefcase, moved from the chair where he left it to the table across the room. His car keys, taken from the silver bowl by the door and placed on the mantelpiece. He never saw me. He would just find these things moved, with no explanation. "Catherine, did you move my briefcase?" I'd hear him ask, his voice tight with a new, controlled frustration. "No, darling," she'd answer, confused. "I haven't been in that room." He started to mutter to himself. He started checking doors, making sure they were locked. The confident, powerful developer was beginning to look over his shoulder. The true turning point, the moment I knew I had him, was the reflections. The house was full of old, wavy glass in its original windows. At night, they acted like dark, imperfect mirrors. I knew which windows, from which angle in the hidden passages, would catch the light just right. He was in the dining room late one night, alone, poring over his blueprints. Catherine and the baby were upstairs, asleep. I put on a dark dress. I stood in the absolute darkness of the passage that ran alongside the dining room, positioning myself by a peephole that looked out towards the large windows on the far wall. I waited for him to stand up and walk towards the sideboard to pour himself a drink. As he did, his back was to the windows, and for a split second, as he turned, his own movement would cause the light from the table lamp to shift. For a single, horrifying instant, he would be able to see not just his own reflection in the dark glass, but mine. A dark, silent shape standing behind him. That was the first time he screamed. It was not a loud scream. It was a sharp, strangled gasp of pure terror. He dropped his glass, shattering it on the floor. He stood there, his heart hammering, staring at the empty space where my reflection had been. He said nothing to Catherine. How could he? How could he explain that he had seen a ghost? His ghost? He was the one building the narrative of my senility, my confusion. If he started talking about seeing things, he would be the one who sounded like he was losing his mind. I had him. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, and I was the unseen, silent warden. The hauntings became my art form. A book falling from a shelf in an empty room. The faint scent of my husband's old pipe tobacco in the air of the study. A single cold draft on a warm night. I was a whisper. I was a shadow. I was a memory, come to life. He started to unravel, piece by piece. His work suffered. He became jumpy, irritable. He lost weight. He installed security cameras, but of course, they captured nothing but an empty room where a book had mysteriously fallen. He was a man being driven mad by an enemy he could not see, an enemy he had created himself when he declared me invisible. The final act was yet to come, but I knew, with a quiet, satisfying certainty, that his reign was over. He just didn't know it yet. The final act of my quiet little play began on the night of the storm. A summer thunderstorm, thick and oppressive, rolled in over Savannah, wrapping the house in a blanket of darkness and noise. It was the perfect stage for a final curtain call. Gregory's nerves were already shattered. He had spent the last 2 weeks living in a state of constant, low-grade terror. He had become a stranger in his own home, haunted by whispers, shadows, and the growing, terrifying conviction that he was not alone. He had even, in a moment of desperation, hired a paranormal investigator, a charlatan with a collection of blinking gadgets who had, for a handsome fee, declared the house to be rife with spiritual energy. That night, Catherine had taken the baby to spend the night with her sister. She said it was because the baby was frightened of the thunder. But I knew the truth. It was because she was becoming frightened of her own husband. His erratic behavior, his constant muttering, his wild-eyed talk of ghosts. The trap was closing, not just on him, but on their marriage. So, it was just him and me in that big dark house as the storm raged outside. I knew this would be the night I would finally make him see me. When the power went out, I heard him cry out, a small, sharp sound of pure fear. I was already in position, in the hidden passage that ran alongside the grand foyer, near the foot of the main staircase. This was the spot Jean-Luc had called the house's auditorium. A whisper here could travel up the entire height of the house. He was fumbling in the dark, looking for a flashlight. I waited for a long, terrible silence between claps of thunder. And then I spoke. Not a whisper this time. My voice was clear, conversational, and it seemed to come from the very air around him. "Are you looking for something, Gregory?" I heard the sound of him dropping his keys, a frantic clatter on the marble floor. He didn't answer. He just stood there, frozen in the dark. I let the silence stretch out. Then I spoke again, my voice full of a sad, spectral sorrow. "This was my house, you know. My Jean-Luc built it for me. We were happy here." "Who's there?" he finally choked out, his voice a raw, terrified rasp. "You called me a fixture," I said, my voice now taking on a colder edge. "You said I was invisible." A flash of lightning illuminated the foyer, and for a split second, he could see the entire empty space. There was no one there. The darkness crashed back in. He let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. And then I made my final move. I slipped out of a hidden panel at the top of the stairs, a panel disguised as part of the wall. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, a dark silhouette against the tall window behind me. I waited for the next flash of lightning. His scream this time was not a gasp. It was a full-throated, primal roar of a man whose mind has finally completely snapped. It was the sound of a rational man breaking against the rocks of something he could not explain. When the lights came back on a few minutes later, he was gone. He had fled. He had run out of the front door, into the storm, and out of my life. He never came back. He called Catherine the next day from a hotel in Atlanta. He was rambling, incoherent. He spoke of ghosts, of shadows in the walls, of me appearing out of thin air. He told her the house was evil, that it was haunted, and that he would never set foot in it again. Catherine, of course, thought he had suffered a complete nervous breakdown, which, in a way, he had. A breakdown I had carefully, patiently, and deliberately engineered. Their marriage, already strained by his erratic behavior, was over. The divorce was quick. He didn't want the house. He didn't want anything from this city. He just wanted to get away. My daughter and I, we are healing. In the quiet aftermath, I finally told her. Not everything. Not the details of my ghostly campaign. But I told her of Gregory's cruelty, of his dismissal of me, of his desire to tear down our home. I told her he had called me invisible. She wept as she listened. They were tears of shame and of a dawning, terrible understanding. She saw, finally, that the man she had loved was a cruel and dismissive stranger. And she saw, for the first time, the steel in her mother's spine. Our relationship is different now. It is quieter, but it is stronger. It is built on a new foundation of mutual respect. I learned that when someone tries to erase you, to make you invisible, they are giving you a strange and terrible kind of power. The power of the unseen. The power to move in the shadows of their own disregard. Gregory's greatest mistake was that he never truly saw me. He saw an old woman, a fixture, a problem. He did not see the woman who knew the secrets of the house he so desperately wanted to own. He did not see the wife of the man who had built them. My husband built this house with secret passages to protect it from enemies on the outside. He never imagined I would have to use them to protect it from an enemy within. So, if you are out there and you feel that you are being overlooked, that you are becoming a ghost in your own life, remember this old woman. Remember that there is power in being underestimated. Learn the secret passages of your own life. Learn your own strength. And when the time is right, find the perfect flash of lightning and make them see you. Thank you for letting me share my little ghost story with you. It is a good reminder, I think, that the oldest houses and the oldest souls often have the most interesting secrets. If you've enjoyed this tale, please do take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and press the notification bell for more stories. And in the comments below, I would love for you to share a story about a time a secret knowledge turned out to be your greatest strength. Love you all. This is Grandma Isabelle, and I'll see you in the next story.